waste. We're going to do it. It's going to happen. But how are we supposed to deal with it? A society has to make things, and people need to consume things. But what do we do with everything that gets left over in the process? And in what ways can we make as closed a loop system as possible? In this episode, David Biello carries us out of the cave as we discuss waste management and in what ways we might be able to create a society that reuses most of the waste it creates. We also talk a bit about energy and what's wrong with how things work at the moment with recycling, because for this society to function properly, we can't overproduce without thinking about the consequences. David is the author of the book Unnatural World and has a myriad of other articles in Scientific American on recycling and energy, which is actually where I found him after reading one of his fantastic pieces. Before I jump into it with David, I'd really appreciate it if you check me out on Patreon and consider donating. There are some really cool rewards for donating right now, but I'm also going to be coming out with some new ones in the future. However, if you're not into doing that kind of thing, I'd be extremely grateful if you could leave a review or comment on what you thought of the show. And finally, let's take our 9th step out of the cave with David Biello.
I sent you the kind of frame, and that's kind of how I always start out. I kind of go back over that just to get us in the frame of mind of the discussion, because for some people, it's been challenging to get into that idea of, we're talking about new society. We're talking about not having to fix what we've got, because that's really hard. Yeah. We're all like stuck in that frame. We're like, this is really challenging. We've got to fix what we got. And yes, we do. There's no doubt there. Like, that's still got to get solved in one way or another. But in this discussion, obviously, we kind of everything's in a way possible within the realm of physics and, resources available, right?
No, we can't have perpetual motion machines. That's going to make the sewage thing really hard.
Well, maybe we can find some aliens and they'll give us some extra knowledge or something, right?
There you go.
Yeah. Let's imagine, that we've purchased an island off the coast of Fiji, and our goal is to create an optimized society fresh from start, meaning we're going to rethink culture, economic structures, educational system, government systems, and urban development. I'm your client, and I'm able to pay you whatever amount it'll take to get it done right.
Awesome.
Right. Unlimited funding. Within, certain constraints, we got to get done. We don't have forever.
Right.
So in this conversation, let's look at what we can do to create a closed-loop waste management system. And by closed-looped, I mean importing as few material resources into the city as possible by recycling products that we already have in circulation.
Right. So essentially, you want me to invent the circular economy, but for, and correct me if I'm wrong, trash, bodily waste, and really everything else that we tend to just throw away in our current society.
Yes. We'll leave out for now the bodily waste.
Okay, good.
We can talk about that if we like, but let's try to. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with just waste. So let's try to narrow it as much as possible. So we just talk about stuff we throw away, right?
Right.
Mainly just material goods.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's just start out and kind of, even though I know I said that we can do whatever, let's kind of identify what are some of the problems right now. What are some of the things that we want to do better than what we do at the moment in the American society.
Well, I think the number one thing is to kind of move away from the disposable society, which we currently enjoy. I mean, really, whether you're thinking about planned obsolescence with our gadgets, which are among our most beloved items, but we trade them in every 2 years.
Bad.
To single-use plastic or even the glass bottle, which in principle is infinitely recyclable, will often end up in a landfill because it's just more convenient to toss it in that garbage can than to toss it into a recycle bin or whatever it might be. So kind of that's the real key, as I see it, is moving away from that disposable society concept when we're thinking about waste. And that, I think, is hugely challenging because it turns out that disposing of things is super convenient and easy. And as human beings, I think we like super convenient and easy, right?
I know I do. Like, make it easy. Like, I don't want to think. Make it super simple for me.
Exactly.
Like, I'm not going to put something in like 5 different bins. I don't have time to think about it. And then I'll do it wrong. I'm like, I'll go somewhere and be like, wait, which one goes into what? Is this paper? Is this glass? Shoot.
Yeah. When I go to Canada, right, where they do have the I don't even know how many bins. Let's say 7 different bins. I always need a Canadian to kind of guide me through the process, right? Because you're like,
oh my God,
wait.
7 bins in Canada?
Yeah. Well, so there's like food waste and paper waste, and sometimes the paper waste goes in the food waste because it's been contaminated by the food. There's the plastics, but only specific kinds of plastic go in one bin, and then there's another bin for another kind of plastics. Now, it's great. Yeah. But you need a course in how to kind of accomplish disposing of your waste.
Yeah, I saw something similar about a little short documentary on YouTube about a place somewhere in the heart of China. It's a small little city, but they decided that they're going to go zero waste and recycle everything. And that's exactly what they have. You come, you bring all your trash there, and you get fined big if you don't do it. And there's someone there that's like helping you sort, and you gotta like ask them like, "Is this going here?" And they've done it, and it's pretty impressive. But at the same time, it's like that is such a hassle for your people.
That's right.
How do you make it easier too, right?
Yeah.
But anyhow,
well, so it's the human. That's why I say it's this the human engineering that kind of makes this most difficult. So we're going to have to kind of sign up all the citizens of this island off the coast of Fiji to moving away from. We're not going to diminish convenience, but we are going to diminish this kind of disposable mindset. And I would say it's a good thing we're on an island because I wrote about this in my book. There another little city in China called Rizhao, which tried to go carbon neutral, which is kind of like a halfway step to zero waste. And the very first thing that industry did was move outside the city limits. Right, so that they wouldn't be subject to the regulations that we're going to kind of cut back on pollution. So we are in the good situation that you can't move off our island, right? So that's gonna help us in the human engineering department. So I think that's our number one challenge is getting citizens who are kind of on board with what we're trying to do. The next challenge is going to be if we're trying to be self-sufficient, which I presume we are because we don't want to import as little as we want.
As little as only if we're like clean out, and then we're like we got nothing else. We're just recycling, and we're kind of a little stuck. We can get a little bit more if we need.
Right.
Yeah, for the most part.
Right. So we have sand, so we can have glass, right? Maybe.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Maybe there's some metal resources on the island. I don't know. If it's a volcanic island, like many of the Polynesian islands, we might be in luck, or we might be in no luck. So we'd have to do a little prospecting to figure that out.
Yeah.
But maybe we're okay with importing steel. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can import at the beginning, right? The goal I think would maybe be to get what we need at the beginning, make our calculations, be like, okay, this is about what we'll need because maybe we'll limit it at like 100,000 people. That's what we cap the city at pretty much. And outside of that, maybe there's an island nearby and we go build another city that can kind of redo the same thing. And because then, we like, okay, this amount of resources will supply this people in like this kind of cyclical way, hopefully, right?
Got it. Well, that's the good news then, because whatever metal we import, as long as we're careful with it, we can reuse it infinitely. Yeah. Assuming that we have, the resources to kind of re-smelt it and repurpose it into the different things we might want metal to be, because we might want it to be a steel fence one day, and we might 50 years later want it to be the structural support of a building. and that'll require energy, but we won't even get into that, right? I'm assuming you have somebody else to solve that problem.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a big one that I'm going to get a lot of people to talk about for sure. That's an important one, no doubt. So yeah, that's
the more free energy you have, the easier it will be to solve literally every other problem you might have. Because if you can throw cheap energy at something, you can really move mountains.
You really can. You really do almost anything.
Yeah.
And now we have the technologies to figure out how to find those energies too, because it's all over the place. Like I've been looking up a couple, and not to go off, but to go off on a little bit of a tangent, right? You know, like currents that are just constantly moving, and just doing the generator there, just throwing some at the bottom of the ocean, and it just constantly goes. Things like that. Or even just like, have you seen the pipes? I think Seattle's installing this in their water pipes, and it's just a turbine just put in there, and like that's constantly flowing water, and then that can just cycle back in, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah,
no, you want to harness as many of those little flows as you possibly can. Just get all the cheap energy you can.
Yes, 100%. So I like that we were talking about. This was one of the questions I wanted to go into. What are some of those materials that are like ideal to use? Because we talked about glass, because that's a really good one. Metal. What are some of the other metals, maybe some other possible materials that maybe people don't think about a lot that are also really kind of endlessly recyclable?
Yeah, well, I think plant-based fibers or even plastics are going to be key if we're going to do this island living thing. So the upside of, say, a bamboo is that it's incredibly strong. Yeah. It grows incredibly fast, and you can use it for a wide variety of purposes. I mean, frankly, if all you had on the island was bamboo, you would have kind of your shelter situation pretty well figured out. It's kind of a wonder material.
Yeah, and it looks cool too.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. Aesthetics are part of it too. I'm a big aesthetic guy. Yeah, function and form.
Well, we don't want people to be depressed, right? Like we want some joy. So plant-based materials like that, something sourced from a bamboo, that is a good way to kind of close the loop. Now, you're not going to be able to infinitely recycle those, but the good news is typically they're pretty, obviously bamboo is biodegradable, right?
Yeah, so that's another good way to do it, right?
It will go away if you throw it away. Yeah. And you can certainly get more than one use out of it, depending on what that use might be. So that is one that I feel like people overlook at their peril. And it's not just the big plants like bamboo. If you can get some kind of algae farms going, you can make a lot of the things that we currently make with oil or other fossil fuels. You can go straight to the source and cut out millions of years of geologic time and just make your plastics from algae.
That's a really big one that I'm glad you brought up, is the algae. Like, that's one I saw when I was in college, and I was like, what? That's so cool. Like, who would have thought about that? Let's look deeper into that. If you can endlessly grow algae, like that, it's just out on the water all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And we're on this island. We've got the offshore resources, so we should be good to go on that front. Now, day-to-day living in a city, you got to, get your kids off to school. You got to go to work. There is going to be trash generated. Yeah. But the more you can kind of keep that trash to organic material, so whether it's kind of plant-based or whatever else, that's something that you can kind of, you can use it as an energy source. So again, getting to that cheap energy problem again. Or B, it will break down of its own accord. It won't cause you kind of long-term problems like some of the plastics we use today that are petroleum-based. And then these other materials, whether it's the glass or the metal, Those are the ones that we have to kind of carefully shepherd through the system so we don't lose any of them. And that's really about thrift, which is an ancient concept that we seem to have thrown away maybe only in like the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, certainly my grandparents were incredibly thrifty.
Yeah.
My parents slightly less so, and now me, I'm completely living in a disposable society. And I think about that all the time, which is why I think you reached out. I think that has been the journey of many modern peoples, not just Americans, but Europeans, Japanese, and now the Chinese are moving in this kind of disposable direction. And if we could start from scratch, I would just eliminate that
concept
completely,
and
go back to the thrift. Thrift was a pretty good idea.
Thrift is a great idea. I'm glad you brought that up. That was a question I wanted to ask, but I didn't know how to ask it correctly. About how do we go to like more of not being such a disposable society? How do we go to really looking at how do we fix things? Like Cuba is really interesting, and they do it out of necessity, but it's still pretty cool that they still have cars from the 1960s that work flawlessly because they have no choice but to fix them up. They just keep recycling and making and rebuilding these cars because they'll work and they work forever. They're built to last, and that's right. We need to think about building products. Like I know the favorite products I use are the ones that will last me forever because I'll just buy things and have them for as long as I can.
Right.
Especially when I find something I really like because I don't want to keep going and getting that over and over and over.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's so you said you're reimagining the economic model and all that. I mean, part of the reason we have a disposable society is because that's what kind of drives the economy a little bit more. Better for the economy to buy 10 plastic bags than to have one plastic bag that kind of lasts you for the rest of your life.
Exactly right. Margins. That's what these businesses are thinking about. And everyone followed suit. Thought it was, this is so cool. Look what America's doing. We'll do it too, right?
Exactly.
And it's like, but hold on.
Yeah, there are some downsides.
Yeah.
Turns out there are some downsides. So when we're re-engineering from scratch, we're going to want to think about that pretty carefully, kind of how you line up the economic incentives so that people will want to save their steel when they're rebuilding their home or whatever it might be, or will want to repurpose the glass or whatever other product it might be as they're thinking about this new wonderful island paradise.
Yeah, totally. So before we go into this scenario that I've created, which is kind of a newer thing I'm doing on the podcast, just give us some idea that a system that I've kind of thought about that I'd like to see why it works and why it doesn't. But before we get into that, I do want to just ask, are there any promising technologies that you've seen outside of the ones we've talked about a little bit that are people are doing it with like recycling or waste management right now?
I mean, honestly, there are not great new technologies in recycling or waste management. There are great new material technologies, right? So on the front end, the different kinds of materials we might use, better plastics, better concretes, better. You think about it, we go through an unbelievable amount of material as a society every year, and so better engineering on the front end means easier processes on the back end. But when you get down to it, recycling is recycling. There aren't necessarily great innovations in how you skin that particular cat.
That's interesting. Why do you think that is? Why do you think people aren't focused on that, really?
Well, it's not so much that they're not focused on it. It's that the kind of waste stream is so enormous that just getting a handle on that, just getting a system that can even process the amount of waste that, say, a New York City generates is such a gargantuan task that then trying to kind of fine tune it falls by the wayside because you're just trying to deal with volume, right?
Yeah. It's like you're doing laundry and like you're getting some done and someone's like, here's some more laundry. Yeah. Here's some more laundry. And you're like trying to do it better, but you're like, they just keep throwing laundry at you.
Yeah.
And you can't get better at doing it or doing it in a better way because you're just trying to deal with the flow coming in.
Exactly. Now, there are kind of new technologies for treating the waste in different ways, so maybe turning it into energy or various things like that. But really, on the back end, it's much more of a volume issue, and that's why they always talk about the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. That's the name of the game.
Okay, cool. So in this scenario, what I'm potentially thinking is that we have a network system. And like you're saying, like it's hard to have bins that you sort things in, and no one should have to think about that. There should be one place you put your stuff in. It's connected to every office. It's connected to every home. You just throw your trash into that. It goes down into a hole that's hidden away underground, and then there's conveyor belts on this path, and it takes it to the waste management system, right? And on the way there, it's like it's getting sorted already. So it's like a sorting process on the way there. They're like robot hands, cameras, sensors, like figuring out what's what, taking it to where it needs to go. And then once it gets there, it gets broken down, disassembled if need be, into further separated materials, and then broken down and recycled, and then put back into the system to be reused. Now, what do you think about that might work? What do you think about that might be insane and really challenging or might not work?
Well, first of all, you've described a larger version of what a municipal recycling facility already looks like a MRF is the acronym. There's all these conveyor belts. There's all these different ways. They use weight to kind of separate your plastics from your metals. When you think about it, I don't know exactly where you're located, but if you're in a major city, you're usually putting plastics and metals together in a bag, right? And you're like, well, wait a minute. Those are two different things. How do they get them apart? Well, it turns out the plastics are usually a lot lighter than the metals.
Weight,
can kind of So everything that you're describing is often what they do in these facilities. So there's nothing kind of infeasible about that.
Okay.
And I would honestly say, if you have all this kind of cheap, free energy, then, building conveyor belts from building to building, that becomes relatively easy as well, right?
Right. Yeah.
So this is not, without cheap, free energy, it might be slightly impractical, but with it, I don't see any reason why you couldn't have this in our beautiful island paradise.
Awesome, man. That's exciting because I want it. I want it really bad. But thanks. I really appreciate you coming on, and especially with me randomly reaching out on Twitter after reading that awesome article that I read. Hey,
that's the wonders of this modern age. You get to make new connections via the internet.
Right? It's spectacular.
Yeah.
But how can people help you? What's the title of your book? And what are some ways they can find you online? Twitter is one, obviously, I just mentioned, but what's your Twitter handle and stuff like that?
I am at DBiello, D as in David, B as in boy, IELLO. And I wrote a book called The Unnatural World, which talks about some of these issues. It's an examination of what we're doing to the planet. And really, it's an examination of the people trying to help us do it better. So folks who are trying to reimagine things, not unlike what you're doing with this podcast, so that we can have kind of a world that is thriving, not just for people, but also for the rest of the planet, which seems like a pretty good deal.
Yeah, that's important too. The whole ecosystem, it's all a part of it. We got to pay attention to what's going on there.
Exactly. So read the book. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I will definitely read it. Everyone else should definitely read it. And again, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It was fun to chat about this and imagine the future.
Absolutely. All right, man. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.